Oh, those baby dinosaurs are so cute! I can't wait until they grow up and destroy our entire civilization. But that's the future, so I don't have to concern myself with it in the 29th and final episode of the all-new Mighty Morphin Zyurangers. So here we are. After over 3 years, we have reached the final 2 episodes of Kyoryu Sentai Zyuranger to be adapted into Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. It's a wild ride of finales trying to finale and non-finales trying to non-finale. That doesn't tickle your excitement receptors, I don't know what will. I'm really good at marketing. But everything I just said is true, as impossible to parse as it is. We covered the first half of this storyline last time. As I explained then, the finale storyline of Zyuranger is 4 episodes long, while Power Rangers condensed it into 2 parts. It was 2 episodes against 1 last time, and the same holds true this time. Power Rangers' main concern is to skim past as much of the content as it can, figuring out excuses as to why the most dramatic beats in the show aren't so big a deal that they can't be resolved within a few minutes, while still working to insert their own dramatic stakes. How do they do? One of my big issues with the first half of this adaptation is a weird structure that left the Power Rangers watching the return of Cyclopsis from the command center rather than out in the field fighting, where they had literally just been. Part 2 tries to turn that discrepancy into a dramatic beat by stating that the reason for that is because the Zords are just a little tired, and they need some time to sleep. In fact, they need 12 more hours before they are fully recharged. Now, I'm going to try to be fair here. This kind of comes out of nowhere. While the fight against Cyclopsis was tough, it wasn't exceptionally more so than any other battle. It seems weird we're expected to believe the Zords took that much of a beating. But maybe we're expected to, even though this is never stated or implied, maybe we're expected to believe this is what happens after every battle. This recharge period isn't the result of significant battle damage, it's just normal wear and tear that's usually taken care of by virtue of Rita not attacking this quickly in succession. Am I stretching? Definitely. But, you know, whatever. Fine. They're trying to wring drama out of this, whatever it is, and boy do they!
We'll take them at half power.
Yeah, Jason and the others are going to take the risky move and bring out the Zords anyway, despite the fact that they haven't had time to properly recharge. Therefore, presumably, they will be even weaker than they were before. Keep that in mind for the end. It gets to the heart of what the show is seemingly going for, a dilemma. However, it's a false dilemma. What's the big rush? Zordon suggests the trapped citizens might have a time limit? Maybe? I guess leaving a giant evil robot around unchecked is bad, but it's still much ado about nothing. Why is this a risky move? Well, because Titanus is gone. They couldn't beat Cyclopsis without Ultrazord, now they can't do that. We don't need to stack on this nonsense about their batteries needing to be recharged. Again, keep that in mind for the end. In fact, keep it in mind for right now because they're already about to walk it back. Let's hop over to Zyuranger. When we last left them, they were getting their butts kicked. Now Bandora uses her magic to finish them off, literally phasing them out of existence. Daijujin actually knocks the Zyurangers out of the cockpit so they don't suffer the same fate. However, now they are helpless. All their guardian beasts are gone and they can't even transform anymore. So yeah, they are officially at their lowest point. These sequences play out similarly in Power Rangers. It's the same footage after all. However, they already start off on the wrong foot. Tail? By editing the loss of those appendages in a really weird way, as if they're trying to minimize the impact. There's nothing in the music that suggests these are important moments. The footage blazes through it as if it's hoping you won't notice. Just compare them. The Zords then disappear and the Power Rangers abandon ship! But don't worry, things aren't nearly as bad as they seem.
They just dissolved.
See, if they lose in battle, they automatically disassemble and return to the secret hiding place to re-energize.
I just don't get this. I mean, I do get this. I get that the Zords have to be back in action in roughly 5 minutes. I'm not even using hyperbole here. Literally 5 minutes from now, they'll be back. As a result, this can't be as bad as it seems. But it is more than a little disappointing that things aren't as bad as anything. Despite all the hemming and hawing of the first several minutes of the episode, they take out their Zords, and literally nothing changes. They weren't ready to be used before, they aren't ready to be used now. No consequences. We're just running out the clock here.
This is done to skip past the quest the Zyurangers have to go on. Barai appears to them in a harness, I mean from the afterlife, to encourage them and lead them to the literal door of Bandora's Mahokai, Magic Realm, where Bandora has imprisoned the guardian beasts. While Boy, May, and Barza hold on to the rope between dimensions, Geki, Goshi, and Dan fight against shadow versions of previous monsters and ultimately free the guardian beasts from their bubble prisons. It's fine. It tidily wraps things up, gives the Zyurangers something to do to earn their happy ending. It's fine. Like I said last time, it all just feels like stuff we've seen before. I've even seen Goshi's bloodied hands before. And I feel like a lot of those epic quests have been better. This is almost certainly the exact same set used in Land of Despair, where their new weapons were held. The big payoff moment is Barza remembering the spell to turn his staff into a log, and everyone acts like this means something.
Is that really a running gag? I had to go and check because I'd forgotten this was even a thing, but in the first episode, Bandora mentions she stole Barza's spells. I don't think it's ever come up again. You can't just never mind. Look, this isn't great, but this is about comparison. Zyuranger brings its characters to a low point they have to work their way out of. In Power Rangers, things just kind of work out on their own.
That's not to say that the Power Rangers' fortunes haven't changed at all.
We have an emergency.
Rita is undoubtedly jamming the frequency.
Yep, that's the best we can do. We all know that Rita, the magical witch, is an expert at jamming radio signals. That's her evil plan. So while the Zyurangers go on an epic, if a bit unoriginal quest to get their powers back, the Power Rangers have to fix a radio. And by Power Rangers, I mean Billy with a little help from Trini, while Jason, Kimberly, and Zach stand around and do nothing. And what are Billy and Trini even doing? I don't know. They're rejiggering the doohickey and reversing the polarity of the negative flange in order to reboot the capacitor to re-establish peak efficiency. Look, David Yost is rubbing two props together, and when the script says they succeed, they succeed. How engaging! Tangible stakes would be nice. But this technobabble solution is literally the only thing the Power Rangers do, since everything else is handed to them on a silver platter or is resolved with a shrug. And as an aside, that reminds me of something I've noticed across lots of episodes of MMPR, but I've never really had a chance to bring it up. So often in cockpit shots, they'll rewrite the scene so that instead of talking about the plot, or the stakes, or the emotion of the scene, the Power Rangers will just be saying random technobabble instead. Instead of, if we don't stop this, so-and-so's going to die, the dialogue becomes, Jason, I have to reroute power to the servo matrix. Oh man, let's keep it together while the auxiliary batteries come back online!
In small doses, it's fine. It makes it feel like a real machine. But after a while, you realize, like with this communication problem, none of these lines have any consequence or require any actionable effort on the part of the heroes where we can understand what's at stake. They're just nonsense words, padding for time.
To desperately try to add some tension to this, the show has Rita send down Goldar and the Putties to stop the Rangers from doohickey. They just stand around and knock things off of tables, but the Rangers finish before they can do anything of consequence, so yay, riveting. Meanwhile, the command center's computer, of its own accord, without Zordon or Alpha doing anything, hacks into Rita's computer. Because if Rita's known for anything besides her sweet jamming skills, it's her computer network.
That means we have access to her files of spells and secrets. Her files of spells and secrets.
And that gives them, Cyclops' weakness. Oh, and also Titanus is back now due to the power of running the footage in reverse.
Oh my god, this is terrible. Anyway, Cyclops' weakness is having to adapt to different Zord configurations. So, remember those Zords that needed 12 hours to recharge? Remember how they didn't get those 12 hours but were instead taxed even further, which must have made them even weaker?
Well, those Zords are now strong enough to defeat Cyclops. And also Lokar? Maybe? See, in the original, the Zyurangers defeat both Doratalos and Dai Satan, so much so in the latter's case, his head explodes. Power Rangers wasn't going to show that, so instead they just don't acknowledge Lokar at all. And he's never seen again. Something comic books. You know, Lokar is so ill-defined as a character and threat, I had to go back to his previous appearance to try to remind myself who he was even supposed to be. It didn't help. With Rita defeated, she returns her palace to the moon by reversing the footage. Hey, Power Rangers gets almost as much mileage out of reversing the footage as I do while editing these videos. So that's it for them, but there's quite a bit more in Zyuranger. Kai is mortally wounded in the explosion. His mother finally gets to embrace him as he dies in her arms. She cries over his body. The heroes burst in, ready to take the fight to the enemy. It is rather surreal finally seeing them in Bondora's palace after all this time. Bondora is furious, and it looks like she's finally done being the singing, dancing comedy villain. Except, her powers don't work anymore. Apparently, if a witch cries, she loses her powers. Which makes sense. She sacrificed her humanity to get them in the first place. So Daijujin seals them all away and flings them out into space. Bondora continues to sing about how much she totally hates children, but when Grifazar and Lami reveal that they have somehow had a child, Bondora positively melts. Everyone gets to work raising this new child, and it's pretty cute. Over in Power Rangers, the city celebrates them. Tommy breaks up a fight among children, one of whom might be Trini's cousin Sylvia? Zordon gives the Rangers a chance to step down in what is obviously footage shot while this was still intended to be a finale.
There are other villains, other crimes to protect the city from.
But they all turn it down, summed up in this line from Zack I've never managed to forget.
So in other words, you can't get rid of us.
And, if nothing else, that's a satisfying note to go out on. Until 1994 rolls around. As for the Zyurangers, they entrust the newly hatched dinosaurs to some kids, and I'm sure nothing will go wrong there. As their mission is now completed, the Zyurangers and Barza hop on a cloud and head off into a new plane of existence or whatever, and the storybook closes.
I'm not going to lie, I wish I had stronger episodes to go out on. The choice is pretty clear, but not for the reasons I want it to be. The best I can say about Zyuranger's ending is that it's functional. It hits the traditional beats for a finale. The characters hit their lowest point. A dead character briefly returns to provide guidance. The story is wrapped up. The characters say goodbye for reasons. Aside from Bondora's story, which is good, don't get me wrong, none of this really stands out in any way. But it technically works. And that's more than I can say for Power Rangers. Even discounting this as the finale that it's not, just as a standalone story, nothing really happens. The heroes are almost completely passive, things just happen around them, and the win conditions are literally handed to them. There are far better Season 1 MMPR stories than this. Last time I said I often come into a review thinking the MMPR episode did really well, and only end up favoring the Zyuranger episode by comparison. This time? As soon as I finished Doomsday Part 2, I immediately said, oh, this is gonna lose. Aside from those iconic celebratory minutes at the end, which is all I remembered about this, there is nothing here. Honestly, I can't even bring myself to bother with our little scoring room. It's so incredibly obvious that Zyuranger wins. I feel like breaking it down into categories would just be flogging a dead horse. It wins all of them. But since this video series has been comparing the two shows together, it's time to look back and see how each series panned out.
I wonder how many of these you remember. The all-new Mighty Morphin Zyurangers saw 45 distinct matchups between the two series. Power Rangers won the first matchup, Zyuranger won the last. Zyuranger's longest winning streak was 5 matches in a row, which it did twice. MMPR's longest winning streak was 2. The Green with Evil, Dragon Ranger arcs were the only ones I scored both individually and as a group. From that, Zyuranger won 3 out of 5 matches, and it also won overall. The Green Candle Part 1 and Part 2 were the only Power Rangers episodes I scored together rather than individually. They achieved a tie. MMPR won a Pig Surprise by default, as there was no corresponding Zyuranger episode. A Star is Born is the only Power Rangers episode to compete against 2 separate Zyuranger episodes, as it adapted the unrelated The Knuckleball of Infatuation and Princess May's 7 Metamorphoses. Zyuranger beat it in both cases. Live Again Ju Soken was likewise the only Zyuranger episode to go into competition twice, against both Birds of a Feather and Season 2's The Ninja Encounter Part 2. Zyuranger won both times. Ultimately, there were 7 matchups ending in a tie, 10 wins awarded to Mighty Morphin Power Rangers, and 28 wins awarded to Kyoryu Sentai Zyuranger. Even if I awarded all the ties to Power Rangers, Zyuranger still beats it pretty handily.
When I made my original videos back in 2010, I proudly proclaimed that I thought Zyuranger was much better than Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. While putting a much more critical lens to them this time around has revealed to me a lot of the flaws of Zyuranger, I can't deny that putting them to the ultimate test has validated that opinion. While Zyuranger doesn't excel in characterization or long-form storytelling, it clearly has the edge in production values, narrative creativity, and ambition. Obviously, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers came into this with a lot of disadvantages. It's easy for me to armchair quarterback all of this 30 years later. I don't doubt they did the best with what they had, but they didn't start out with much. Still, it's been so much fun to see how they tried. Even when it didn't work, it was often ridiculously entertaining, or just ridiculous. And it clearly set the groundwork for a beloved franchise. From what I understand, Zyuranger is not a terribly well-regarded Sentai, but Mighty Morphin Power Rangers was and still is iconic, and has definitely enjoyed the more enduring legacy. So, from almost the moment I began, I've had people asking me about what happens after Zyuranger. I'm glad you're invested enough to ask. I feel like I've mostly answered this over the years, but perhaps it's been rather piecemeal, so let me just lay all of it out on the table. I never had any intention of going beyond Zyuranger in an episode-by-episode comparison sense. I never did. For one, 3 years is a long time to devote to anything. For another, I've maintained I'm neither a Power Rangers or Sentai fan. I was a Power Rangers fan as a child, and Season 1 is what I have a nostalgia for and what I wanted to go back and re-examine as an adult. But just logistically, it's almost impossible to go forward from where I'm leaving off. For the next 30 episodes or so, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers is not going to be adapting anything. Having run out of Zyuranger episodes to adapt, Saban commissioned Toei to create new original fight scenes. So while there is still plenty of Japanese footage going forward, it's all brand new. There's nothing to compare Power Rangers to. Midway through Season 2, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers begins adapting Gosei Sentai Dairanger, repurposing its footage. But not much. Given that Power Rangers keeps the Zyuranger costumes, there's very little footage they can use at all, and they're no longer bound in any way to those stories. From that point on, it's mostly original footage with a teensy bit of Sentai footage sprinkled in. They're really just adapting the monsters and robots. Let me give you a quick example of how this would work.
So I start with episode 1 of Dairanger, wherein its storyline and characters are introduced for the first time. Its monster is Baron String. Where is Baron String adapted? Well, that's Mighty Morphin Power Rangers Season 2, Episode 14. An episode wherein Jason is feeling guilty about Tommy losing his Green Ranger powers again, because he got them back and lost them again during all the content I had to skip over. Well, if I start there, a lot of that Baron String fight footage comes from Dairanger Episode 2. If I continue into that one, however, Baron String is defeated at the very beginning. The primary monster of that episode is a purse monster who collects human sacrifices. So where is that adapted in Power Rangers? Well, that's episode 19 of Season 2. Tommy and Kimberly are going on a date when her purse turns into a monster. But there's actually no Dairanger footage used for this. They just repurposed the monster costume. And oh, Tommy is the White Ranger now instead of the Green Ranger because that also happened in the episodes we skipped over to cover this first Dairanger story. However, we have not yet met his corresponding Dairanger character, the Kiba Ranger. But there's also another monster in this Power Rangers episode, one that does use Dairanger footage, a lipstick monster that comes out of the purse. However, in Dairanger, those two monsters are not related at all, which means we have to jump over to Dairanger episodes 5 and 6 to see how that footage was originally used. And those episodes are a story about how Lynn discovers 4 of the team's robots while the lipstick monster carries a vendetta against her for scarring her face.
See what I mean? Just to do one comparison, I would have to cover 6 episodes that are scattered all over the place. And narratively, what do these stories have in common? Absolutely nothing! These aren't adaptations, they're just strip mining fight footage. So what would I even be comparing? I just don't believe there's any way I can compare Dairanger to Power Rangers on an episode-by-episode basis. Showing how that season came to be works much better when covered in an overall fashion. And hey, in case you didn't know, I've already done Mighty Morphin Dairangers in that fashion. I even specifically referenced the lipstick and purse monsters. Heck, at 226,000 views, it's the single most watched video I've ever made in my entire YouTube career. If you haven't seen it yet, it's waiting for you. So is Mighty Morphin Kaku Rangers, I've done that one too. They're together with all of these videos in the playlist. But hey, I'm going to keep exploring this topic looking at these series. If I do find a way to cover at least some of Dairanger on an episode-by-episode basis, and you guys want it, I'll do it. This has been a lot of fun for me. Hey, if it's popular enough, I'll consider skipping ahead to another Power Rangers season, one where they are back to adapting one-to-one. I'm sure you guys know this stuff better than I do. What's a good series to cover for my purposes? Zeo to O-Ranger? Time Force to Time Ranger? Go ahead and start giving me suggestions and I'll consider it. And please tell me why it's a good fit for this format, not just name-dropping Sentai series you like. I definitely have to figure out something to replace this with after I come back from Dragon Ball Dissection December. I do think I need a little bit of a break from Power Rangers though. I'd like to explore some of my other interests, like I've managed to do a few times already this year. I've been teasing an Avatar dissection for a while. My art book just came in. And thanks to patron and friend of the channel Sylvie, I had the capability to rip my Blu-rays. So, I might do that for a little while. But if you're interested in Japanese live-action tokusatsu series, I'm not going to leave you hanging. I actually do have one I want to make a video on as soon as 2024 rolls around. I just watched the live-action Pretty Guardian Sailor Moon series for the first time, and I am absolutely dying to talk about it. Literally dying of a nondescript generic television disease to talk about it. If you know, you know. But thank you so much for joining me on this journey through the all-new Mighty Morphin Zyurangers. This has been such a joy to create. I love that I've had all of you with me to endlessly compare these things in such an overwhelmingly nerdy fashion. It's been the most perfect cap to this fandom that captured my imagination exactly 30 years ago. Thank you, thank you, thank you. And I'll see you next time. Oh, so in case you didn't know, I was at New York Comic Con a few weeks ago. And while I was there, I saw Walter Jones, Steve Cardenas, Catherine Sutherland, Karen Ashley, Austin St. John, and Jason Narvi, because they were all there as guests. And by I saw them, I don't mean that I got in line to meet them or get an autograph or any of that stuff. It's not especially my thing. I mean, I literally saw them. Oh, look, there they are, over there. That kind of thing. So I happened to be walking by Walter Jones's table when I think he was doing a cameo video for somebody. He stood up in his chair and turned the phone camera around and addressed the attendees gathered around, of which I guess I was in close enough proximity to be. And he called out to everybody, "What time is it?" So it turns out that when a Power Ranger asks you that question, the correct response is not, as was my first instinct, to hopefully look down at my watch and go, he must not know the time. Perhaps I can be of assistance. The correct answer is it's Morphin time. You would think that would be obvious. Everybody else seemed to pick up on that. I clearly don't know what I'm doing in my life. But I can always let you know what time it is. At least when it's not Morphin time.